This is just a fantasy of mine. Please don't come in the comment section being all literal.
Alright, Shalom. So, if you knew, understood reality as much as I do, then you would understand that your fantasy has more basis to a degree on reality because a lot of the other people are living in a fantasy world, right? So you have a lot of modern Christians, for instance, that are following the vain traditions of man, stepping all the way back to Babylon. Same do the Ashkenazi Jews, right? The state of Israel. Follow the vain traditions of men, stepping back to Babylon. But the catch-22 of that, it too, is the Prophet Muhammad likewise follows the vain traditions of men, stepping all the way back to Babylon. So what all the big three have in common is Yeshua. Modern Christians will say he's the Son of God, and they'll use Trinity terminology and what have you, because they don't understand the true context of everything that he did and what he was preaching against, so they do exactly what he was preaching against. So if Yeshua was walking the earth today, they would be the ones stabbing him in the back, right? Same applies to the Ashkenazi Jews. They'll say that they follow the Torah and what have you, but they don't follow the Torah, right? Because they're Freemasons, right? They're not actually Jews. That's why they're considered the synagogue of Satan in Revelations, right? Because they basically bastardize Christianity, and they're the synagogue of Satan. They're Satanists, right? Freemasons are prominently satanic. That's the whole principle behind it. So they're being called out in Revelations, right? Now you have the Ishmaelites, aka Muslims, and I can't directly correlate them to following the vain traditions of mine. I can only go based on hearsay, but nevertheless, through my research a little bit on the Ishmaelites, that they do. I've been told by a former Ishmaelite, aka Muslim, that the terminology like Allah and what have you stems all the way back to Babylon as well, which has correlations to Simon Ramis and what have you too, right? And if you look at their traditions and what have you, everything that they do, it's contradictory to what Yeshua is preaching against. Now they'll use Yeshua as a prophet and they'll try to claim him as being a Muslim and what have you, but he wasn't a Muslim. He was a Jew that was going up against his own family, the Israelites and what have you, for being disobedient to Yahweh and his commandments, which modern Christians do likewise, right? 1700 years ago, Emperor Constantine changed the Sabbath to Sunday, a liberal day to worship the sun, breaking two of the Ten Commandments in process. So modern Christianity hasn't been Christianity for the last 1700 years. Ashkenazi Jews aren't actually Jews. Ashkenazi comes off the line of Japheth. That's why me being a former member of a Black Hebrew Israelite church, it's a matter of those Ten Commandments, but those Ten Commandments are indiscriminately applied, so it doesn't matter what your skin tone is. If you're going up against another, because we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, so as the church, if you're going up against somebody based on their skin tone or what have you, that's, you're using superficial arguments and you're not focusing on the heart of the person, you're focused in on the superficial aspects of the person, right? Their skin tone, their heredity, what kind of hair they have, and everything else. So they have a lot of credence to being the original Israelites, but they also have a lot of credence in regards to being the original Israelites as far as being disobedient to Yahweh and his commandments, right? Because they're still being vain in their observations. So as much as they might be more knowledgeable, they favor their vanities over equality. So that is a principle, right? So you look at modern Christians, well, you got to bless Israel, you got to bless Israel. You have Candace Owens, where does it say in the Bible you got to bless Israel? Because she's more on the Catholic dynamic, and Catholics are against the Freemasons, and the Ashkenazi Jews are the Freemasons, right? So it's that whole holy war that's still going on in modern day, and people don't realize that we haven't gotten out of the Dark Ages. When it comes to evolution theory and the Big Bang Theory, think about that one. That's extremely racist, right? We came from apes. Think about it. Freemasons are prominently satanic and prominently racist, right? So use that. And then you tie it back to Charles Darwin, may have been a Freemason himself, but his dad and his grandfather definitely were, and it's his grandfather that taught him those theories and the principles behind the Ten Commandments being about equality, not favoring your vanities, right? That's what the Freemasons do. They're favoring their vanities. They're utilizing the pretense of science, not actual science, to try to marginalize everybody because we're intellectually superior, right? Anybody that goes up against them is anti-scientific, and you're a Neanderthal, right? So you don't think that the United States is riddled with a lot of racism, but that's globally too. It's not just within the United States, and a lot of it, that's why if you adhere to the Ten Commandments, you have full authority and control over all branches of government, right? It's not based on your heredity, it's not based on your skin tone, and they have no cause for action to come up against you because you do have that ability to be morally superior, so to speak, than they are. Because you're not focused in on the knowledge of the person, you're focused in on the purity of their heart, which has foundations in the Federalist Papers and everything else. So that said, you have full right to sue any and all public servants that come up against you. Title 42, Section 1983, as well as 1985. You can rebuke them as devils, right? You don't have to pay taxes. Because look at how modern, the satanic churches, in other words, modern Christianity, and anybody that perceives that I go to church, well, if you are the church is a people, not a place, and the church gets a tax exemption by the IRS, then why am I not tax exempt? I am tax exempt because they can't discriminate against me, right? And the church isn't a place, it's the people, and they can't allow for discrimination. Right? Now you have full authority over all public servants. Now the IRS can't even come after you because you're tax exempt because the IRS code itself allows for discrimination. That's one of the principles. If you understood the principle behind the Bible and what have you. Because they want you to, for instance, when you fill out tax forms and what have you, charity, you might have to write down your charities, because if you don't write down your charities, then you have to pay taxes on your charitable donations to other people, right? Now you're paying taxes on your charities and what have you, and you're not allowed to keep your alms to yourself, right? Because now you have to get a benefit from keeping your alms to yourself, right? So that's violation of your religious principles. Not to mention that the other satanic churches that comply with that principle, they likewise don't have the ability to preach against the government under the First Amendment to do that, which makes that tax exemption that they're given by the government, again, Freemasonry, stems off of Lyndon Johnson, right? Lyndon Johnson was a Freemason. He was prominently racist in the 80s and on congressional record for being so, right? So that said, he gave the church a tax exemption if and only if they don't preach against the government, because it's a matter of controlling the church. And why don't they like the church? Because the church preaches equality and it preaches against discrimination. There is no male, there is no female, there is no Jew, there is no Gentile. Nothing is based on the heredity nor skin tone of the person. It's based on the merits of their actions. Look at what Martin Luther King Jr. was pro-against. Is prominently against the Democrats, right? Notorious racists and everything else. But he also said the Republicans had their own problems, right? He had his own problems too, and they utilized that to marginalize him. And ultimately he was, right? And that was like a week or so before he was to become a Freemason himself. Probably because he would have debunked a lot of their theology and brought it to the light of what have you, so they got rid of him before he could do that, right? Freemasons don't like a lot of things that are going on in society, and they're trying to control society. So again, it's not just a matter of focusing on the black community, focusing on the reality of it, and take control, take charge, rebuke devils, right? Anybody that's disobedient to Yahweh and His Ten Commandments are children of Hashatan. So if you follow the way, the truth, and the light, Yeshua, in other words, and understand the Ten Commandments more thoroughly, then the state nor federal government has any authority over you. You don't have to pay taxes. Shalom.